Well, our next stop on the world trip is on the Cultural Connection Tour is India, and I know you're thrilled to be going to India for the first time. We have a friend, Devendra, and he's devoted so much time to helping us on the ground there. We'll be in New Delhi and Gurgaon, March 25th and 26th. Those are individual dates. New Delhi is the first one, and Gurgaon is the second on the 26th. Thank you so much, Devendra, and I know you're very much interested in going to India, Tom, and you have a lot to say about the blending of the Eastern and Western cultures.
Yes, well, India is the place where many of these concepts originated. Now, not necessarily the MBT take on the concept, but the basic concepts. We're living in a virtual reality. Just said, you know, we're living in an illusion, and other such Eastern philosophical concepts are very similar to many of the concepts in My Big Toe. What My Big Toe brings to it that's very different is seeing it through the lens of science, seeing it through the lens of logic rather than through the lens of storytelling and philosophy. But it's kind of the birthplace of much of the understanding that's in My Big Toe. So it's going to be neat to go there. In a sense, it almost feels like going home. You know, it's like going back to the source. So it's going to be really a lot of fun and an honor, you know, to give these talks in India, the place, you know, the place of origins.
So hi, we are here with Mr. Tom Campbell, who is a nuclear physicist and has also worked with the US Department of Defense. And he's here in Asia for the first time and in India as well for the first time. So first of all, Tom, I want to really thank you from the bottom of my heart, because thanks to the internet today, although you haven't been to India before, I have been following your work and I've been listening to you and your videos for almost 4 years now. So I would like to thank you for adding that to my life and also to a lot of people across the world. So thank you. This is your cultural connection tour, isn't it? And over the next 2 days you'll be doing workshops. In Delhi will be the science and spirituality workshop, and in Gurgaon will be the science of finding your purpose. Could you tell us a little bit about these two workshops?
Well, in the first, I'm going to concentrate a little more on the spiritual side and a little less on the science side, although I will talk about science in both of them. Try to give everyone an overview of how this reality works, what its purpose is, and what their place is in it. Why are they here in this reality? In the second, I'm going to focus more on the science, the connection between consciousness and physics. Talking about reducing that gap between science and religion. You know, you have science over here, and then you have spirituality over here, or religion, and the two of them don't seem to get along very well. But actually, once you understand consciousness, you can derive physics. So it turns out that they're all really part of the same understanding. They're not two separate things. They're just two different ways of looking at one thing.
That's great. We really look forward to that. Now, I want to ask you, being a scientist, how was it to move to spirituality? When was it that the shift happened, and how did it feel to you?
Well, it wasn't a sudden shift. I started with transcendental meditation, did that for a year or so before running into Bob Monroe, who wrote Journeys Out of the Body, and he was starting a laboratory for studying consciousness. So I started studying consciousness with Bob, learned how to do out of body whenever I wanted to, and then tried to figure out what was going on. You know, was I making it up? What was this thing called consciousness? How did it work? I had probably been at Monroe Laboratories for a couple of years, excuse me, before I started seeing auras, images, lights around people and things. So I studied those. What did it mean? Why were they there? You know, what was it? So I spent the next 35 years trying to figure out how it all worked, doing experiments there. And eventually, it just all made sense. When I understood that consciousness is information and that this physical reality is also information, I could put the two of them together under one seamless thing. So it was a long time of thinking and researching and trying to figure it all out. And of course, all that time, I'm changing along with it. You know, it's a very growing path. You don't come out the way you started.
We're changing because of it as well. So the one thing that I find, you said, I've followed a few of your lectures, and you would speak about how the tree is not really there, and it's the construct of this particular virtual reality. But how is it that being in nature also is really, really helpful to us? So how does that work? How does that dynamic work?
Well, being with nature, say being in a very serene, quiet, beautiful place, takes all the stress out of your life. There's no stress there. When you are in a busy place, you're in a city with lots of people. You're connecting with all those people. It's a big jumble and cars and noise and fumes and all of that. That builds up stress in your system. And being in a deep woods someplace by yourself or with just a few people lets all that stress go. So yes, it's a virtual reality, but this virtual reality can be all sorts of things. It can be pleasant and wonderful. It can be horrific and terrible. And nature is excuse me, one of the wonderful parts of it. So the fact that it's virtual doesn't mean that it's not significant or not real. All realities are virtual realities. Consciousness is the only thing that's real. So your dream reality, that's a virtual reality. When you die here, you wake up in a virtual reality. When you go out of body, that's a virtual reality. All those things are different virtual realities, and none of them are more or less real than the other. There is no such thing as physical and non-physical. The reality that you're in seems physical. Everything else seems non-physical, no matter what reality it is. So when you're in your dreams, the dream seems physical, and your body lying in bed doesn't exist. That's non-physical. So there's no real physical and non-physical. That just depends on the observer viewpoint that he has.
It's beautiful. The other question that I have is, in this country for particular, while we say that it's all about giving, right? So this world is all about giving. Whereas in India, that is something that kind of creates a conflict amongst most people. Because over here, a lot of people grow up with the fact of how we should just give and not take care of ourselves as a person. And then they keep giving everything they have, and then they come to this place and they still feel absolutely no love. Or they in fact feel more frustration because they're giving. That is that's been taught to them. It's not about themselves, it's just about giving. So where is it that between I and giving that you have to find that sort of a balance?
Well, if you give and then feel frustrated at the end because you haven't gotten what you want out of that giving, your giving is not really genuine. It's not really giving. Giving means there's no strings attached. Love means there's no conditions. You love, it's unconditional. If it's conditional, it's not love. So if the reason you're giving is because you think you should, well, that's coming out of your intellect. It's not coming out of your being level.
Right.
So you're acting in a giving way or in a loving way, but that's different than being, in a giving or loving way. If you give because it's what you are, it's who you are, you just give because that's what feels right to you, you'll never get to the point that you're disappointed in the result. Because every time you give, the result is immediate. When you give, you see that you've done something valuable for somebody. And just that doing a valuable for somebody is your reward. So you get all your rewards along the way, and you'll never end up at the point saying, I gave, and now nothing. You weren't really giving. You were doing what you thought you should out of your intellect and probably out of fear. That's what I should do. If I don't do that, I'll be a bad person. So working from the intellect is really, for the most part, working out of fear and ego for most people. So I'd say it really wasn't sincere giving if they end up in that attitude.
Yeah. It happens a lot over here because people grow up in these families and they're told that,
Right.
you live according to us and it's all about giving. It's in the text. So it becomes really confusing and conflicting.
Right. It becomes a belief that you should do that rather than a reality that you are that way. There's a difference between being something and doing something. And growth, spiritual growth, requires you to be it, not do it from the intellect.
That is very true.
And that's true with the male-female love too. Most of us, when we fall in love with another person, we're really falling in need, not falling in love. We find somebody else that meets our needs, and maybe we meet their needs, and then we go off and get married and have kids and whatever, but it's a need-based relationship, which is not a love-based relationship. People's needs change. Now, you have to renegotiate the deal. See, that's a conditional love. I'll do this for you if you do this for me. Those kind of bargains don't last long. They're not something that'll go for 30 or 40 years because needs change, people change, everything changes, and all suddenly you don't meet each other's needs anymore. You don't want to meet each other's needs anymore. So we do the same thing there. We start out and say, well, I was in this relationship and I gave and I gave and I gave, but I never got anything back and it was miserable and awful. Well, you didn't really give and give and give. You did what you thought you were supposed to do, but you really were doing that for the result you would get, not just because that's the way you are. So that is a problem. People do things because they think they should, not because that's authentic the way they are. So you have to first be authentic. Then what you do, if it's authentic, good or bad, at least it's yours. And from there you can change it. But if you're not authentic, you can never change it because you don't own it. And you can't change things you don't own.
The other question that I think is extremely important in today's day is we have the internet today, and we have a lot of different modes of communication, whether it be the television or the internet, and just we're free to watch whatever content or consume whatever data that we wish. How important is it, or how much effect does the data that you consume have upon you?
Oh, well, it has a major effect if you let it. It depends on how you interact with that data. There's a big discussion going on about whether or not children are damaged by playing violent video games. Well, if that child is experiencing that video game at the being level, they are in the game. They are playing that character. They get into it, if you will. Then that has a higher potential to help them or harm them, either one, because now it's part of their experience. If the child is just playing the game, it's just a game, they don't see anything more than a game in it, it's not as likely to hurt them. That's why some children get damaged, other children seem to escape. The ones that escape are only processing it at the intellectual level. It's still not helpful to them. You know, violence and that sort of thing, even processed at the intellectual level, is not helpful. It adds negative experience to your experience base. It makes you more prone to negativity yourself, more accepting of negativity in others. So that's not good. But it's not as bad as if you actually identify personally, you know, with your characters. Then it's more harmful. But I'd say it's not good. You know, think about horror movies. People go watch horrible things in horror movies, and they generally get into it, and ladies scream in the movie theaters, and everybody gasps, and people are up on the edge of their seat with a lot of tension. Well, when you experience something horrible, that changes you in some little bit. Now you've got that horrible experience in you, and that will modify who you are just a little bit. Again, if you really identify with it, it'll change you more. If you don't, it'll change you a little, but it's still there. It doesn't make sense to choose horrible things to look at. Why would somebody want to look at horrible things? That's dysfunctional. Yeah,
but today the news is dysfunctional. So
yes.
I see a lot of people watch it, and I see their blood pressure rise, and I'm like, put it off. But they're like, it's the news. So, but yeah,
yes,
it's
that's
the way
true.
it is.
Well, the news is that way for a couple of reasons. One is that we have survival instincts that make us more interested in things that can hurt us, and less interested in things other than that. Because for the first, well, I don't know, a couple of 100,000 years that we were walking around on the planet, being aware of what could hurt you was very important. So people immediately will focus in on something negative. Somebody gets killed, somebody gets, you know, in trouble someplace, and they focus in on that immediately because that's part of the way we work. Unfortunately, that generates fear. The more horrible stuff you see, the more fearful you are. The more fearful you are, the more dysfunctional you are. The more likely you're going to become even more fearful yet. Fear is a cycle. The more fear you have, the easier it is to get more fear. So it becomes a downward kind of cycle. The news junkies who have to watch the news every night, they live in a very fearful space. And that fearful space that they live in generally keeps them unhappy, keeps them from growing up, keeps them from you know, choosing love rather than fear. Fear becomes a major part of their life. They make all their decisions based on their fears. That's a sad place to go. But we're kind of led there by our own instincts, but we need to be able to turn that news off and say, well, if it's important enough, I'll hear about it. I don't need to see all this stuff.
Leading up to that, do you think currently, or this is a really important time for us to kind of move forward and shut down? And I would rather say it's already happening, that we're moving to a higher place collectively. So would you like to tell us a little bit about that?
I think we are now in a position to make big strides in our consciousness evolution in becoming love. For the first time since we got out of the trees and started standing upright. That's because we have a couple of things coming together at the same time. One of them is that the high priests of our culture, the scientists, of which I am one, the physicists particularly, are about to announce to the world that this reality that we live in is a virtual reality, which creates credibility for another source other than this reality. A virtual reality can't create itself. It has to be created somewhere else, by something else. It's an information reality. So an information-based reality has to be computed elsewhere, which means that if this is a virtual reality, as the physicists are saying, then this must be a subset of something bigger. And that something bigger, excuse me, must be non-physical to us. So now you have a superset from which we are derived that's non-physical. That's starting to sound almost religious. You see, that's starting to sound very spiritual. We have, so science is going to take us to that space probably in the next decade or two. At the same time, we now have an internet. So those kinds of things can spread very quickly.
Oh, just the body's lighting up.
Yeah, whereas before it didn't. All that information was local. And the internet also can unite all of the various peoples and subgroups all over the world that have some spiritual understanding. So I think we have then an opportunity as a race to take a big step forward. And I believe in preparation for that, we've kind of been getting ready for it over the last couple of decades.
I think so too.
And that's what people feel when they say they can feel the sense that something's about to happen. We're heading, you know, into a better space. And I think that's true. And I believe that we're preparing for that. People like yourself, you see, spreading that word, trying to help that preparation, organizations like yours. And they're everywhere. They just pop up all over the place. And that's just trying to prepare humanity for this opportunity. And how it is just an opportunity. It doesn't have to happen. We could go the opposite way. Instead of growing up when we find out that there is some superset that's non-physical, we could decide to start fighting with each other for ownership. You know, that's the, my God's a better programmer than your God kind of a, you know, silliness. If we get into that, then we could actually devolve some before we turn around again and evolve. But hopefully that won't happen.
Hopefully the 100th monkey effect will come into play.
Right, and that won't happen. And people will have a sense of what sounds true, what rings true with them. Organizations like yours all over the world will help that happen. And that's kind of why we're here talking, right? So that so that when that day comes, hopefully in the next decade or two, not that far away, that we the people will be prepared for it and won't go to the fighting with each other over who's in charge. That would just be more of the same. So we don't want to go there. We need to be able at that point to see a bigger picture of our reality, one that fighting for being in charge, you know, doesn't play in.
Right. So I'm going to close with this one last question. It's about, I understand this is a virtual reality, but a lot of us see a lot of, how to say, synchronicities or signs, or that help us kind of come back into alignment or give us faith. How would you explain that?
Well, those synchronicities happen because of their effect. The larger consciousness system of which we are a part has a strategy for its evolution, and we're it. We are part of that strategy. So as we grow up, it grows up because we're it. It's us. We're just pieces of that larger consciousness system. So it wants us to succeed. It's created this virtual reality for us to experience in to help us succeed better with more feedback and more connectiveness. So if it's something that it can do, some little sign, as you call it, a little thing that it can do that doesn't violate the rules, because it's just this minor little thing. It may violate probability, but it doesn't violate any of the hard rules. Then it will do that just to help wake people up, just to help people realize that there is a bigger space. So when they get to that feeling of, well, you know, I've done that, I've meditated, nothing really happened, and they're kind of discouraged, then something will happen to renew their interest something will happen just out of the blue that makes them think that maybe it's something there after all. So those synchronicities will happen. Now, if you're open to them, and if you can use them, if it's something that will help you see a bigger picture, encourage you to learn and to grow, then you will get them. If you are not open to them, and even if something like that happens, you just blow it off and not understand, what you've got, then you won't get them. So not everybody has a life that's full of synchronicity. The people who do get it, do have a sense they're open, they have synchronicity in their life every day. They live a life of synchronicity. They find that they don't have to control anything. They give up control altogether because everything they need to succeed in the big picture is right in front of them all the time anyway. And they know that. There's no need to control anything. Matter of fact, they realize that if they could control things, they couldn't control it any better than the way it already is.
For sure.
You see? So there's no need to control. Everything works fine. And the lesson you need, the book you need, the connection you need with somebody, whatever, it's there right when it can do the most good. The system supports you to grow up. If you're not ready to grow up, then the system will wait until you are. So that's where synchronicity comes from. It's just the system trying to help us grow up.
Thank you so much for your time, Tom. And is there anything that you'd like to say to people in India or across the world, or birdies like me sitting in a corner listening to you?
Let's see. I suppose the message that I always have for people is the answer to anything, to any question that's really important, any question that's really significant, love is the answer. So you can start with that and realize that if that's difficult for you, giving, if that makes you frightened, if it's scary that you would just give without getting anything back, you think that would maybe someone would take advantage of you. Well, that's your fear talking. You need to work on that fear, let go of it, and just give and not worry about what comes back. That, if you live your life that way, you will find that you will not be abused, you won't be taken advantage of, people will not push you around, you won't be anybody's doormat, you will gain power, you will gain influence, you will help others. So it's by giving it away that you get it back. That sounds counterintuitive, but that's the way that the system works. So trust it, give to it, not with your intellect, from your being level, from your heart, if you want to put it in those terms. And then it's real, and then it's yours, it's unconditional. If it's conditional, it's not love. So meet life with joy. Make everything a lesson. You can even make it a game. How can I grow up from this? Where's the lesson for me here to learn from? Even those things that make you cry, even those things that hurt, where's the lesson? There's always a lesson, and then pretty soon you start seeing life as a series of challenges. It's not, oh no, such and such happened. It's, oh, how can I learn from that? What's the right choice here? How can I be helpful? And then you are helpful, and people appreciate it. It puts a smile on your face, and life is good. And it'll stay good. So if you're not happy and you have stress and you have pain and you're struggling and can't seem to get out of the struggle, that's your fear. And the way to get out of that struggle is to stop struggling. Let it happen. Learn from it. Make good choices. Then your life will be different. Your relationships will be different. Everything in your experience will start being helpful rather than challenging. It's a good place to live.
Yes, most definitely. So thank you so much. Thank you for watching. And stay tuned, and you can find Tom all over the internet, and his amazing books are available on Amazon, so you can buy them there.
They're also free on Google Books.
Oh wow, really? I bought all of them.
Yeah, well, you can buy them, or you can get them for free. As soon as I publish the books, I put them on Amazon.
Oh, wonderful.
And my internet is full of, my YouTube on the internet is full of free videos as well.
Thank you.